2:52 p.m., Sea of Japan. The water is calm, visibility is clear. Late afternoon light reflects off low swells rolling toward the Japanese coastline. USS Destroyer, an Arleigh-Burke-class guided missile destroyer, is operating in international waters, conducting a routine patrol east of the Korean peninsula. The ship maintains steady speed, radar sweeping, weapons armed, but silent. This region is tense even on quiet days. North Korea lies just beyond the horizon, Japan to the south, Russia to the north. Few places on Earth carry more overlapping military risk. At 2:52 p.m., that risk becomes real. North Korean coastal radar stations switch from passive monitoring to active targeting mode. Fire control systems illuminate the destroyer's position. This is not tracking, this is preparation. On Allied monitoring screens, analysts see it immediately. Something is about to happen. North Korea has tested missiles here before, short-range launches, ballistic demonstrations, political signaling, but today is different. This is not a test. At 2:52 p.m., 2 missile launch signatures appear almost simultaneously along North Korea's eastern coastline. Bright plumes rise from hardened launch sites, then disappear as the missiles drop low, accelerating out over open water. 2 anti-ship missiles, both aimed at a single target. USS Destroyer. On the destroyer's bridge, alarms sound instantly. Radar tracks lock in, threat vectors appear. Impact windows calculate in seconds. The Aegis combat system takes control. The captain does not ask for confirmation. Engage! Interceptor missiles launch within moments, streaking upward into the afternoon sky. White contrails carve arcs above the ship as defensive systems race to meet the incoming threat. One interceptor detonates near its target. A flash. Debris. The second missile continues. It descends low, skimming the surface, using the curvature of the sea to evade detection. At 2:53 p.m., it detonates close enough to cause damage. The shockwave slams into the destroyer's superstructure. Sensors shake. Fire alarms trigger. The ship remains afloat. But the message is unmistakable. North Korea has just fired on a U.S. warship. Across the region, responses ignite instantly. In Japan, air defense systems elevate readiness. In South Korea, command centers activate crisis protocols. In the Pacific, U.S. naval forces begin repositioning. This is no longer a localized incident. This is escalation. North Korean leadership believes the timing is perfect. Late afternoon. Limited daylight remaining. A single destroyer operating near contested waters. From Pyongyang's perspective, the logic is simple. Demonstrate resolve, inflict damage, force Washington into restraint. They believe the United States will hesitate. They are wrong. What North Korea does not see is what is already moving. Beneath the surface, American submarines are repositioning, silent, undetected. Farther south, carrier-based aircraft are already being armed. Pilots briefed, engines warming. High above the region, strategic assets shift their orbits. This response is not emotional, it is procedural. At 2:55 p.m., U.S. Indo-Pacific Command confirms hostile intent. Rules of engagement change instantly. What was a patrol becomes a combat operation. USS Destroyer maintains position despite the damage. Damage control teams contain secondary fires. Systems remain functional. Radar coverage never drops. The destroyer is hurt, but it is not neutralized. That distinction matters. On the North Korean coast, commanders wait for confirmation. They expect to see the American ship withdraw. They expect hesitation. Instead, they see something else. The destroyer holds course. Aircraft begin appearing on long-range sensors. Subsurface contacts vanish from North Korean tracking. The environment shifts in a way Pyongyang has seen before, but never experienced firsthand. At 2:58 p.m., the first confirmation reaches North Korean leadership. The U.S. has not disengaged. The U.S. has escalated. Orders are issued to prepare defensive measures. Air defense units go on alert. Missile forces disperse. But the window is already closed, because by the time North Korea realizes what it has triggered, the response is already in motion, and it will not stop. When the next phase begins, it will not be symbolic, it will be decisive. By 2:59 p.m., the engagement has already moved beyond the destroyer itself. USS Destroyer reports stable propulsion, intact combat systems, and contained damage. The ship remains fully operational. Radar coverage is uninterrupted. Weapons are hot. That single fact changes everything. Because, from Pyongyang's perspective, the destroyer was supposed to retreat. It does not. Instead, it holds position in international waters, maintaining a defensive screen toward Japan. That decision is deliberate. It signals intent. At 3:00 p.m., U.S. Indo-Pacific Command authorizes expanded response options. Not retaliation, control. Carrier-based aircraft lift off from positions south of Japan. Pilots are briefed midair, targeting data updates in real time. Submarines already operating in the region receive new tasking. They do not surface, they do not transmit. They simply adjust course. North Korea cannot see them, but North Korea will feel them. At 3:01 p.m., Allied radar systems detect increased North Korean military activity. Mobile missile launchers disperse inland, air defense units power up, coastal artillery repositions. This is not preparation for defense. This is preparation for survival. Pyongyang understands what comes next. At 3:02 p.m., U.S. electronic warfare aircraft enter the battlespace. They do not fire. They do not announce themselves. They jam. North Korean radar screens begin to flicker. Tracking becomes inconsistent. Identification and friend or foe systems degrade. Communications experience brief interruptions. At first, operators assume equipment malfunction. Then the pattern becomes obvious. They are being blinded. At 3:04 p.m., U.S. commanders receive confirmation that North Korean coastal tracking capability is degraded across multiple sectors. This is the turning point. Without reliable sensors, North Korea cannot control escalation. It can only react. At 3:05 p.m., USS Destroyer launches its first response. Not toward land, toward the sea. Precision strikes eliminate suspected surveillance assets operating offshore. Small craft attempting to reposition are neutralized before they can report back. These actions are quiet, unbroadcast, but they remove the last remaining eyes North Korea has on the battlefield. At 3:06 p.m., airspace above the Sea of Japan fills with activity. American aircraft operate at multiple altitudes, some visible, some not. To North Korean observers, the sky itself feels occupied. They cannot tell how many aircraft are present. They cannot tell where they are coming from. They cannot tell which direction the next strike will arrive from. This uncertainty compounds every decision. At 3:08 p.m., North Korean command issues conflicting directives. Some units are ordered to hold positions. Others are instructed to withdraw inland. Missile forces receive partial stand-down orders, then revised instructions minutes later. This indecision is fatal, because American systems do not hesitate. At 3:09 p.m., long-range precision weapons are launched. Their targets are not population centers, not symbolic landmarks. They are command enablers, radar relay stations, fiber-linked communications hubs, mobile command vehicles coordinating missile forces. The strikes are synchronized. Within minutes, entire sections of North Korea's coastal command network go dark. At 3:11 p.m., Allied intelligence confirms cascading failures. Missile units lose contact with Central Command. Air defense batteries operate independently, without coordination. Targeting data becomes outdated almost instantly. North Korea's military structure, designed for centralized control, begins to fracture. At 3:13 p.m., U.S. forces pause briefly, not to stop, but to reassess. Battle damage assessments confirm targets neutralized. No civilian infrastructure impacted. No escalation beyond military necessity. The decision is made to continue, because North Korea still retains launch capability, and that cannot remain true. At 3:14 p.m., additional aircraft enter from multiple vectors. These are not warning passes. Weapons are armed. At 3:15 p.m., North Korean leadership realizes the mistake. They did not demonstrate resolve. They invited domination. This was never about two missiles. It was about what firing them would unleash. By 3:16 p.m., Pyongyang issues an internal directive to de-escalate. But the directive never fully propagates, because the systems required to transmit it no longer function. The timeline is no longer theirs. At 3:17 p.m., the next phase begins, and this time it will not be defensive. At 3:17 p.m., the character of the operation changes. Until now, the response has been controlled, layered, and defensive in tone. That restraint ends quietly, without announcement. From positions well beyond North Korean detection range, precision strike assets receive final authorization. Targets are already loaded, coordinates already verified, timing already synchronized. This phase was planned long before the first missile ever launched. At 3:18 p.m., the first wave begins. Cruise missiles descend toward North Korea's eastern military districts, flying low, following terrain, adjusting course in real time. They are not aimed at cities. They are not aimed at symbols. They are aimed at function. Fixed radar installations that guide coastal defenses vanish in rapid succession. Antenna arrays collapse, control rooms implode, backup generators fail seconds later. North Korea's eastern air defense picture collapses almost immediately. At 3:20 p.m., secondary strikes follow. Mobile missile support infrastructure is hit while in transit. Convoys disappear in flashes visible from kilometers away. Fuel carriers ignite. Reload vehicles cease to exist. Missile units that fired earlier now find themselves unable to reload, reposition, or receive instructions. The chain is broken. At 3:22 p.m., North Korean air defense batteries attempt to engage. They fire blindly. Without coordinated radar, intercept attempts are erratic and ineffective. Missiles launch, fail to acquire targets, and fall harmlessly into the sea. Each failed intercept confirms the same reality. They are no longer defending airspace. They are reacting to noise. At 3:24 p.m., Allied aircraft cross a new threshold. They do not announce presence. They do not issue warnings. They strike. Precision-guided munitions impact hardened military facilities along the coast. Command bunkers collapse inward. Secure communications rooms are crushed beneath reinforced concrete. Inside those facilities, officers who minutes earlier believed escalation could be controlled lose contact with the outside world. Some attempt to relocate. They do not make it far. At 3:26 p.m., signals intelligence confirms a sharp drop in coordinated military traffic. What remains is fragmented, isolated units attempting to interpret partial information. Commands issued too late. Orders contradicted moments later. This is the moment when structure fails. North Korea's military doctrine relies on central control. Without it, initiative disappears. At 3:28 p.m., strategic bombers move into release positions. They have not crossed borders. They have not violated airspace. They do not need to. Their weapons carry the message. Additional precision. Strikes ripple inland, targeting the infrastructure that allows command to exist at scale. Fiber links are severed. Relay towers collapse. Hardened nodes fall silent. The blackout spreads. At 3:30 p.m., North Korean leadership attempts to reassert control. Emergency communications protocols are activated. Redundant systems are engaged, but redundancy assumes the first system survives. It did not. At 3:31 p.m., the Sea of Japan becomes quiet. No further launches, no radar emissions, no coordinated movement. USS Destroyer remains on station, its presence constant. The ship that North Korea attempted to intimidate now anchors the entire battle space. At 3:33 p.m., Allied intelligence confirms something unprecedented. For the first time in decades, North Korea's Eastern Military Command is functionally disconnected from Pyongyang. Orders are no longer flowing outward. Information is no longer flowing inward. The system is isolated. At 3:34 p.m., U.S. commanders pause again, not because resistance has increased, because it has collapsed. The question is no longer how to stop further attacks. It is how to ensure they never resume. At 3:35 p.m., authorization is granted for the final kinetic phase. Not widespread, targeted, deliberate, decisive. At 3:36 p.m., a final set of strikes lands against command facilities responsible for missile authorization along the eastern corridor. These are not symbolic hits. They remove the ability to repeat what just happened. Missile crews lose direction. Launch authority disappears. Control codes are rendered meaningless. At 3:38 p.m., North Korea's eastern military zone effectively ceases coordinated operation. The blackout is not total darkness. It is worse, partial information, no certainty, no command. This condition is unsustainable. By 3:40 p.m., Pyongyang understands the reality. The escalation ladder has been climbed and removed. There is no next rung. But the operation is not yet finished, because dominance is not complete until the message is unmistakable, and that message is still forming. At 3:41 p.m., the final phase begins without spectacle. There is no dramatic announcement, no declaration, no visible escalation to the outside world. From the inside, however, the shift is absolute. U.S. commanders authorize actions designed not to punish, but to end capability. This distinction matters, because punishment invites retaliation. Capability removal does not. At 3:42 p.m., coordinated electronic suppression expands across North Korea's eastern region. Not jamming alone. Systemic denial. Power fluctuations ripple through military installations as grid connections drop offline. Backup generators fail to synchronize. Secure networks collapse under sustained interference. Facilities that rely on constant power begin to shut down one by one. Screens go black. Terminals freeze. Data streams vanish. Operators stare at dead systems. They have never trained for this. At 3:44 p.m., Allied cyber units initiate the final layer. This phase leaves no explosions, no visible damage, no footage for propaganda. It leaves absence. Command databases become inaccessible. Authentication systems reject valid credentials. Encrypted channels refuse to open. Orders can no longer be verified. In North Korea's military culture, unverified orders are not followed. Everything stops. At 3:45 p.m., the last functioning long-range radar station on the eastern coast ceases transmission. The blackout is now complete. North Korea has no coherent picture of the air or sea surrounding it. From Pyongyang outward, the chain of awareness has been severed. This is what going dark actually means, not destruction, disconnection. At 3:46 p.m., USS Destroyer receives confirmation. No further hostile emissions detected, no launch preparations observed, no command activity recovered. The ship remains on station, engines steady, weapons ready. But there is nothing left to engage. At 3:47 p.m., Allied aircraft begin controlled withdrawal from forward strike positions. Not because the mission failed, because it succeeded. The skies remain monitored. The sea remains watched. Dominance does not require presence everywhere, only awareness everywhere. Inside North Korea, the silence spreads. Units await orders that never come. Commanders attempt to reach higher authority. Lines remain dead. For nearly 20 minutes, no central directive is issued. This delay is unprecedented. In a system built on immediacy and control, Delay is collapse. At 3:50 p.m., Pyongyang issues its first internal communication. It is fragmented, delayed, incomplete. It does not instruct retaliation, it instructs restraint. At 3:52 p.m., international observers notice something unusual. North Korean broadcast channels go silent. Military-linked communication frequencies fall quiet. State-controlled messaging pauses. This is not coincidence, this is containment. At 3:55 p.m., regional partners begin receiving confirmation. Japanese maritime patrols report no further threat activity. South Korean systems return to monitoring posture. U.S. forces maintain readiness without escalation. The crisis is stabilizing, not through negotiation, through reality. At 3:57 p.m., U.S. command formally concludes the kinetic phase of the operation. No ceasefire is announced, none is needed. The battlefield no longer exists. By 3:59 p.m., the meaning of the last 37 minutes becomes clear. North Korea did not lose assets alone. It lost initiative. It lost tempo. It lost the ability to choose what happens next. That loss is permanent. The two missiles launched at 2:52 p.m. were meant to send a message. They did, but not the one Pyongyang intended. They demonstrated in real time what happens when a single American warship is attacked. They demonstrated how quickly control evaporates. They demonstrated how silence can be imposed without occupation. By 4:01 p.m., Pyongyang is effectively dark, not bombed into ruin, disconnected from consequence management, unable to escalate, unable to respond. The operation does not end with celebration. It ends with certainty. By 4:02 p.m., the region has stabilized. No further launches are detected, no radar emissions return, no command traffic resumes. USS Destroyer remains on station, its silhouette steady against the late afternoon light. Damage control teams complete final assessments. Systems remain functional. The ship that absorbed the strike never left the battle space. That fact alone reshapes the outcome, because the destroyer did not withdraw. It endured. Across the region, reactions unfold quietly. In Japan, air defense systems stand down in phases. In South Korea, command centers return to monitoring posture. In the Pacific, carrier groups resume controlled movement. There's no victory announcement. There doesn't need to be. Everyone watching understands what just happened. Inside North Korea, the response is measured and revealing. State media delays its first statements for hours. When messaging resumes, it avoids specifics. There are no claims of retaliation, no images of counterstrikes, no threats of escalation. The tone is defensive. That silence speaks louder than rhetoric. International monitoring agencies publish confirmations. Missile launch infrastructure along the eastern coast is offline. Command and control nodes remain inactive. Naval movements are frozen in port. No civilian infrastructure was targeted. No population centers were struck. The response was precise, deliberate, contained. Global markets react accordingly. Oil prices remain stable. Shipping insurance rates do not spike. Commercial traffic through regional sea lanes continues uninterrupted. This detail matters, because markets respond to risk faster than governments, and the markets saw no risk, they saw control. Strategic analysts begin drawing conclusions. The engagement lasted 37 minutes from first launch to full blackout. 2 missiles were fired, 1 destroyer was struck, and an entire military corridor lost operational capability. This was not disproportionate, it was doctrinal. To understand why, the timeline matters. At 2:52 p.m., North Korea launched 2 missiles at a U.S. destroyer near Japan. At 2:53 p.m., defensive systems engaged. At 2:59 p.m., Allied escalation began. By 3:17 p.m., the response shifted from defense to dominance. By 3:45 p.m., North Korea's eastern command structure ceased coordinated operation. By 3:59 p.m., Pyongyang was effectively dark. The entire sequence unfolded in less than 1 hour. This was not improvisation. It was preparation meeting opportunity. Every layer was already in place. Submarines already positioned. Aircraft already armed. Electronic and cyber capabilities already integrated. The attack did not create a response. It activated one. For decades, North Korea relied on ambiguity, threats without timelines, tests without escalation, provocation calibrated to avoid consequence. That strategy depended on one assumption, that escalation could be controlled. On this afternoon, that assumption collapsed. The 2 missiles launched at 2:52 p.m. were meant to demonstrate capability. They did, but they also demonstrated vulnerability, because they revealed launch sites. They revealed command pathways. They revealed decision structures. Once revealed, those structures were removed. The result was not occupation, not regime change, not prolonged conflict. It was something more instructive, a demonstration of what happens when escalation crosses a boundary that cannot be uncrossed. By nightfall, North Korea's eastern military district remained silent. No radar emissions, no naval sorties, no missile activity. The blackout persists, not because of ongoing attack, but because the system that supports response no longer functions. USS Destroyer eventually resumes patrol operations. The ship will be repaired. The crew will rotate. The mission will continue. Because the sea does not pause. The lesson from this day is not hidden. It is simple. Attacking American warships does not create leverage. It creates exposure, and exposure invites removal. At 2:52 p.m., North Korea fired 2 missiles. At 3:29 p.m., the region fell silent. 37 minutes, 1 decision, permanent consequences. This was not a war. It was a boundary test, and the boundary held.